Good morning and welcome to Community Church Unitarian Universalist. I am Alicia, your worship associate, and it is a joy to be here with you today. So who are we as Community Church? We are a progressive, open-minded, and inclusive religious community. We welcome all who are on a spiritual search for truth and meaning. Ours is a faith in action as we do the work of social justice and elevate compassion in our quest to live ethically, recognizing the inherent worth and dignity of every human being. You can look to your weekly email for announcements, and at this time I'd like to bring up Sean Mott to give us an update from our stewardship campaign.
That's the first time I was ever given a soundtrack. A brief update on our progress in the annual pledge drive, which is the drive to ask folks to contribute money to run the church. Our lovely associate Cynthia has filled in our progress on the palm tree this morning. Our pledge amount is up to $71,801. That does leave us at a significant shortfall to where we hope to be. Sorry about that, thank you. Yeah, we're still at a significant shortfall. Can you hear me now, Esther? We're at a significant shortfall to the goal, okay, which is $169,000. So again, we're at $71,801. That leaves us a little bit less than $100,000 to go. So we hope to receive more pledges. A couple of words of promotion for the campaign and what we're trying to do. CCUU is member-supported and member-run, okay? So it's not unlike PBS and NPR. That means the money that we put toward the church stays here and it gets used to pay for programs that we decide to promote. An interesting fact I learned about how the money is spent here is, and this is from my service on the audit committee, even the minister here is not allowed to spend the money. The minister can advise and request regarding how to spend the money, but what we bring in and raise is decided by the members. So I think that's really special. And although CCUU does pay for a subscription type membership in the Unitarian Universalist Association, this is an option the church exercises, and I mention that because as a member-run institution, we're not subject to being dictated by a top-down organizational structure. Okay, so again, what we pledge and what we put towards running the church stays here, and how that money is spent is decided here. So that gives us an opportunity to choose what programming and type of worship we wish to promote. Anyhow, enough about that. I have here in my hand some blank copies of the pledge form. If anybody would like to pledge who hasn't done so, you can stop me after the service today. You're welcome to fill out the form now and give it to me. You can also take it with you and mail it to the church. You can bring it next week. Okay? There's many ways to turn it into where it needs to go. John, a question?
Marianne, let me email mine.
You can email yours. Yes, that's true. So talk to me, talk to Marianne Gottschall, who is away today. Kathy Larimer and Bill Fernandez are also involved in the stewardship committee. Okay, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. So the opening words, they're
from Martin Luther King Jr. And this was given to City Temple in London, England, an excerpt of it, a small excerpt of it, December 7th, 1964. And his talk to them was called The Myth of Time. And he said, "Now I would like to mention one or two ideas that circulate in our society, and they probably circulate in your society and all over the world, that keep us from developing the kind of action programs necessary to get rid of discrimination and segregation. One is what I refer to as the myth of time. There are those individuals who argue that only time can solve the problem of racial justice in the United States, in South Africa, or anywhere else. You've got to wait on time. And I know they've said to us often in the States and to our allies in the white community, just be nice and be patient and continue to pray, and in 100 or 200 years, the problem will work itself out. We have heard and we have lived with the myth of time. The only answer that I can give to that myth is that time is neutral. It can be used either constructively or destructively. And I must honestly say to you that I'm convinced that the forces of ill will have often used time much more effectively than the forces of goodwill. And we may have to repent in this generation, not merely for the violent actions of the bad people, but for the appalling silence and the indifference of the good people who sit around saying, wait on time.
Let us now prepare for worship with our chalice lighting. It is Community Church's custom to light a chalice, invoking hope and eternal truth to our worship. Please join us in singing We Light This Flame with the words printed in your order of service.
Good morning, everyone. It's that time of year again. Every 4 years it comes about. So I'm going to read to you 10 reasons why voting is important. And this is by Emmeline Sokin Huberty. The history of voting in elections stretches far back in time. Ancient Greece seems to have been home to the earliest form of democracy. Voters can only be male landowners. Similar restrictions continued through the years and across nations, but different groups like women fought for more equal voting rights. Throughout the world, there are different voting systems, but the process is always important. Here are 10 reasons why. Voting protects democracy. At its core, voting is about democracy. The more people participate in elections and exercise their right to vote, the more important it is for politicians to represent voter interests. If people don't participate, politicians won't be motivated to listen because their positions aren't at risk. An active voting population protects democracy. Number 2, every vote matters. Many people don't vote because they believe their vote doesn't matter. The reality is that elections are often decided by very close margins. This is especially true for smaller local elections. There are already fewer votes in these smaller races, so each vote holds a lot of weight. If anyone realizes their vote matters, governments would be significantly more representative. Number 3, voting shapes social agendas. There are many social issues affected by elections, including but not limited to marriage, reproductive rights, capital punishment, freedom of speech, and religion. Social issues affect everyone in one way or another. To have to say in who gets to pass laws on social agendas and what laws are put in place, voting is essential. Number 4, voting shapes the economy. The laws within a society don't only affect social issues, they shape the economy as well. This includes laws on taxes, the cost of higher education, student loan policies, Social Security benefits, and healthcare costs. Politicians voted into office also decides our governmental budgets, such as how much money goes to the military versus social safety net services. By voting, people can make their economy priorities clear. Number 5, voting affects environmental policies. As climate change continues to reach for the future, it is important than ever to vote with the environment in mind. Globally, environmental policies have become contentious and urgent. Some politicians understand the dire situation we're in, while others continue to deny there's even a problem. Voters decide who will make the important decisions. Number 6, voting affects foreign policy. All nations must engage with other countries, whether it's on trade, shared interest, or resolving conflicts. Many voters might not think much about how their votes determine foreign policy, but these policies can affect everyday things like how much goods cost, the price of gas, and job opportunities. For people in the military or who work internationally, foreign policy is also extremely significant. Number 7, voting impacts your wallet. Speaking of how much things cost, voting also has a direct effect on your money. Elected officials at local and national levels are in charge of countless budgets. Taxes, which are taken from your paycheck, fill out those budgets. Voting lets you have a say in where that money goes and who has to pay what. As an example, the tax rate for the wealthiest people in an area of huge interest in the United States. How little corporations pay in taxes is also frequently on the ballot in the form of politicians who oppose or favor higher taxes. Number 8, voting holds leaders accountable. In places where voters fill out government votes have a lot of power. If a politician is chosen because of their promises, but then backs down, voters can vote them out. This accountability is a huge reason why free and fair elections are so important. If voting rights are threatened, it inhibits people's ability to hold elected officials accountable. Politicians can remain in power and break their promises, even if most of their constituents want them gone. Number 9, voting impacts the present and the future. People vote on issues that matter to them now, but voting also impacts the future. The most notable example is found in the court system. In places like the United States, citizens don't directly vote for the Supreme Court justice, who serve lifetime appointments and whose rulings reverberate through time. However, people do vote for the president and members of Congress. The president is the one who selects judges, and then Congress votes on their confirmation. Many people believe that is why voting for a president is so important. It's less about the president, who can only serve up to 8 years, and more about who might select for a lifetime appointment on the highest court in the country. Number 10, voting is part of protecting human rights. The ability to have a say in who runs your government is a human right. In places without some form of a voting system, people can't participate in government. People can't run for elected office if they want to change things. Leaders are not held accountable through elections. The right to vote also maintains and protects other human rights, such as the freedom of association and freedom of expression. Voting matters because human rights matter. Thank you. And if you please help me and sing out the children for RE. Thank you so much. And vote.
The first reading I have for you this morning is from UU the Vote. So Unitarian Universalists have our own Get Out the Vote efforts called UU the Vote, and this comes from the website. Some of us feel spiritually called to organizing and democracy. At UU, the Vote, we are putting our faith in action by living out the fifth principle of Unitarian Universalism by working to preserve and protect the sacredness of democracy. On ballots all over the country, basic human rights, from abortion access to voting access, are either won or lost by how we vote on November 8th. Democracy itself is on the ballot. When we refuse to vote, we give the anti-democratic authoritarians to take more power away from us. The 2022 midterms is not a practice run for the presidential election of 2024. These midterms will decide if we can even have a fair presidential election in 2024. This election will decide the fate of not just our lives, but the lives of our children and grandchildren. This is not the time to sit aside and wait for the next election. Anti-democratic forces are hoping that we sit this one out.
Now is our sacred time of joys and sorrows. If you have a need to share with this community, whether it be expressing something that weighs heavy on your heart these days, or letting us know what reason there is to celebrate, you have several options. If you're joining us online, you can write in the chat box for this to be read out loud. If you want to write yours to be read out loud, Lizzie in the back has some note cards you can take, or there will be time for you to come up to the pulpit after our musical interlude, which is 195. 145. Yes, let's do that. love this. I'm happy because I love dogs and the doggy blessing is exciting. Also excited for the doggy blessing. Next week, yes. Are there others who have a joy or a sorrow that they wish to share with us this morning?
I was trying to write it, but I thought it would be easier. So this is a real joy for me. My daughter and her husband got married the week before COVID hit. And they never, and anyway, long story short, last Tuesday they finally left to take a honeymoon. And they went to Lisbon for 4 nights and then they were going to Casablanca. But this is the thing. Her husband, Nick, arranged and surprised her in Lisbon with 3 of her 4 half-sisters from Mexico. And there's a cute little video, but and I get goosebumps thinking about it. But that's just a big joy because that's a new relationship that they found out that they have these half-sisters. So anyway, it's awesome.
Anyone else who would like to share? Then we will light 2 more candles. One for the joys left unsaid, perhaps still waiting to be shared. And one for the sorrows left unsaid, perhaps that we cannot yet put words to. Know that we love you and that we hold you in our hearts.
The second reading I have is from Senator Warnock. When the Senate worked to advance the freedom to vote for the John R. Lewis Act, this is not his words, but just leading up to him. So there was, this is the words that he did for the Freedom to Vote John R. Lewis Act when he was on the floor. And he spoke on the Senate floor about the future of the fight to preserve voting rights and the importance of the federal government taking action to protect every eligible voter's access to the ballot in Georgia and nationwide to make it possible for voters to make progress on strengthening health care, creating jobs, addressing climate change, and more. The John Lewis Voting Act did not advance to become law. The following excerpt is Warnock's floor remarks regarding the John Lewis Voting Act. We cannot hide from history. January 6th happened. But here's the thing. January 5th also happened. Georgia, a state in the old Confederacy, sent a black man and a Jewish man to the Senate in one fell swoop. Our nation has always had a complicated history, and I submit to you that that's where we are. We're swinging from a moral dilemma. We are caught somewhere between January 5th and January 6th. Between our hopes and our fears, between bigotry and beloved community. And in each moment, we, the people, have to decide which way are we going to go and what are we willing to sacrifice to get there. The question today is, are we going to give in to a violent attack whose aim is now being pursued through partisan voter suppression laws in state legislatures? And so here's the question tonight. America, are we January 5th or are we January 6th? Are we going to give in to the forces that seek to divide us by gerrymandering us, suppressing us, and subverting the voices of some of us in pursuit of power at any cost? Or are we going to live up to that grand American covenant? E pluribus unum, out of many one. I choose what Dr. King called beloved community. I choose America. I choose a nation that embraces all of us. So election time, as everyone knows, is coming up quite quickly. In Louisiana, we are not just voting on a U.S. Senate race or House of U.S. Representative races, but 8 amendments, several judge positions, among other positions that are on the ballot. New Orleans has 4 early voting locations, and you can find a lot of information, if you don't already know this, on Go Vote mobile app, which is spelled here in Louisiana, Geaux, Go Vote. And it can be downloaded to help you navigate this election. Early voting can be done up until November 1, if you don't want to wait until November 8th. And those locations are City Hall, Algiers Courthouse, the Chef Mentor Voting Machine Warehouse site, and then if you live here near this neighborhood, which I know not everyone does, we have the Lake Vista Community Center on Spanish Fort Boulevard, just north of here, up towards the lake. And if you are in Jefferson Parish or Metairie, I don't know why they don't have a Metairie location, but you can also find this online. There's Harahan, Kenner, Marrero, and Harvey locations. As a church and nonprofit, we can't endorse candidates, but we can encourage everyone to vote, to learn about issues, and encourage congregations to vote the church values that we hold. What does our faith call us to do? Our principles call us to support democracy, to act with compassion, to see the interconnectedness of all of life, and to support equality and justice for all. Yet, talking politics and religion together can be strife with sand traps. Is it talking about the vote itself? Is it finding a political party that lines up with someone's values? Or is it living out one's values in a multiplicity of ways, including the ballot box? There are the values of isolation, of power, of non-inclusion. And then there are the values of diversity, inclusion, equality, equity, wholeness, honoring the beauty of Mother Earth. In addition to what we have here in the state of Louisiana to vote for, we have other state elections that will have effects in how we live in this state, but we will not be able to vote in those elections. We have, as we know, Georgia, Iowa, Nevada, Arizona, Pennsylvania, Texas. And these states are voting, among other states, for governors, U.S. senators, U.S. representatives, secretaries of state, and they will have a ripple effect across this country. How does our democratic right to vote reflect the inclusion of others, the marginalized, the poor, the disabled, the sick, our animal kingdom, and the health of our planet? For those who value progressive ideals and for those who don't hold progressive ideals, there is a lot of anxiety happening around this upcoming election on both sides. For me, my mother, when I was a baby, had me canvassing with her for the Shirley Chisholm for President campaign. I don't think many thought Shirley Chisholm would break the glass ceiling that year in being the first female or the first black president at that time, but she was one of those important seeds for building the movement, a light and beacon of what was possible, what could be one day. That was the same election year that George McGovern had a major loss to Nixon. The elections that follow that many of you know was Carter versus Ford. We had Reagan, Bush Sr., Clinton, George W. versus Gore, which we remember with Gore winning the popular vote, yet losing by 5 electoral votes. George W. versus John Kerry. We had Obama versus McCain and Romney. Trump versus Hillary Clinton. And finally, the Biden-Harris ticket. Now, with a Senate tied and a House almost tied, a nation completely polarized. Issues such as tax cuts, environmental rights, poverty used to dominate conservative versus liberal debates. Now, a loss of a woman's right to choose what she does over her own body, the precedent that it sets for that, protecting the earth from outright destruction, and democracy are now the values that are defining how people will vote this November. There are leaders who want to put a steel trap on that ceiling, a battle for who holds power and the reasons for wanting to hold that power. Is it power to expand the historically oppressed, or is it to maintain power? To share and expand, or to narrow, define, and maintain? Ballot initiatives is where some of these values are at play this upcoming election, particularly here in Louisiana. If you have questions about the upcoming ballot initiatives, there has been an analysis done by the nonprofit, nonpartisan group Louisiana Budget Project, LBP. LBP was formed in 2006 as an initiative of the Louisiana Association of Nonprofits. The Louisiana Budget Project's vision is to make Louisiana government transparent and accountable for all Louisiana citizens. The website states about these amendments that are on the ballot. These amendments deal with weighty issues such as slavery, property tax, and voting rights. The legislature has a long track record of making permanent and complex changes to our state constitution by placing amendments on ballots in very low turnout elections. In 2021, for example, voters were asked to consider 4 amendments for which a whopping 14% of registered voters weighed in. This should raise some serious questions about the legitimacy of the way in which we change our Constitution. The Unitarian Universalist Association has UU the Vote program, which encourages UUs to use their democratic right to vote. We can make steps towards more equality, and voting is one of the ways that we can engage in this democratic, with a small d, the democratic process. We live in a world where current capitalistic systems prioritize corporate profit over human well-being and planetary health, that prioritize company profits that destroy the earth over maintaining what is sacred, diverse, and divine in this life. Our society struggles to give equal access of health care to all, where those who have easy access to health are prioritized, and where health and well-being is sometimes commodified rather than being a human right. There is historic inflation, of course, happening across this world right now, and human rights are being reversed or in question at best, such as a woman's right to choose, wondering if this is a precedent for other civil liberties to be removed, such as LGBTQ rights. We still have slavery occurring in our prison systems, or indentured labor, which is exempted under the 13th Amendment. And immigrants who don't have securities, even though they have lived in this country for years. There is so much vulnerability in this world right now. We are anxious and angry at the powers at play in this country and the world today. Sometimes our privilege has led the way of being in a bubble of security, when other places and communities are falling apart. Historically, many have a hard time seeing beyond our own bubbles, especially in more prosperous moments in time. As the years and decades move on, humans are becoming increasingly aware of our interdependent lives, which is supported by the Earth's ecosystem. What we do to Earth equates to what we do to ourselves. This is no longer a metaphor for some who have seen it that way. We all now see global warming, droughts, wildfires, seeing the increases in the regularity of hurricanes, seeing increased poverty due to these increasing occurrences, as well as increased gun violence. Our bubbles of political economy include borders. World food distribution in the world is an example of where one can see powers and wealth of nations at play, and what nation citizens get priority to be fed and which ones don't. The United Nations being one of the only worldwide institutions that have any chance of pursuing a more equitable check and balance to this extreme privilege and extreme poverty. Our bubbles of economic class result in what financial class or caste we find ourselves in. Our bubbles of being born in a country at a certain place and time with no rationale of why. Our bubbles of being raised in families that practice love or not. Our bubbles that forget that we are interconnected to everything else, even to God as Jesus and the Israelites preached. We continually forget there is not just a community of people, but we constantly want to define where that line is in a place or time. A family, a neighborhood, a school, a city, a country, a continent. If God is a unifying force, what is the purpose of highlighting what makes us separate? Why not focus on what can be shared as opposed to protected? And change the conversation of not how we accumulate wealth, but how we use that privilege of having wealth to affect others and society at large. As Unitarian Universalists, we work for justice. We see that we are typically in a privileged position, especially in the United States, where many countries face war, famine, and loss of civil rights, including countries that are overseen by dictators, and where citizens cannot vote. Sometimes it is easier to see when the weak are being controlled by an oppressor looking from the outside to another's woe. The closer things become, logically, it becomes more subjective and less objective. Much in the Bible addresses power and how that power can be used with kindness or exclusion and desire for more power. Disciples of Jesus were not interested in aligning with power, quite the opposite. Whether acknowledging the essential need for Sabbath days, preaching to love thy neighbor, or defending the oppressed, the faithful Israelites began welcoming Gentiles to their cause, mission, and view, that there was a God that believed in equality for all. We don't need to define a D or R, Democrat or Republican, and how we decide to vote, but the values and how power is used or abused. In the Bible, Proverbs records godly repercussions for those who are not virtuous. Both sides typically claim to be on the virtuous side. But what does the Bible say about being virtuous? Well, in Proverbs 28:15-16, it says, like a roaring lion or a charging bear is a wicked ruler over a poor people. A ruler who lacks understanding is a cruel oppressor, but one who hates unjust gain will enjoy a long life. And in Matthew 6:24, it states that there is not a God and something else to be loyal to. In Matthew 6:24, it states no man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. The Aramaic word for wealth is menon, and some have admitted this translation in sharing this verse, and often admit that very last sentence outright. The Bible is not talking about multiple deities, but how some put wealth before other values. This was not a value Jesus had, or his followers. One of the stories was how he turned one of the popular stories that is known by some is how he turned the change tables upside down in the temple. In addition to power and wealth, in the Bible, there are other ways that one can see how power and privilege are used, how that power and privilege needs to have not just words, but deeds. In James 2:14, it says, "What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if you say you have faith but do not have works? Can faith save you? If a brother or sister is naked and lacks daily food, and you just say to them, 'Go in peace, stay warm, and eat your fill,' and yet do not supply their bodily needs, what is the good of that?" Or as Johann Christoph Arnold says, we cannot choose to live in harmony with just God or just with ourselves to the exclusion of others. Whether in the prophecies in the Sermon on the Mount or verses in the Gospel of Matthew, there are warnings against false prophets, with many verses in the New Testament that refer to sheep and wolves and thieves. In Matthew 21:12-13, it states, "And Jesus went into the temple of God and cast out all of them that sold and bought in the temple, and overthrew the tables of the money changers and the seats of them that sold doves, and said unto them, It is written, My house shall be called the house of prayer, but ye have made it into a den of thieves." Matthew 7:15 says, "Beware of false prophets which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves." Not properly identifying wolves leads to hardships, and in the Israelites' case, persecution. In Matthew 24:10-13, it says, "They will betray one another and hate one another. And many false prophets will arise and lead many astray. And because of the increase of lawlessness, the love of many will grow cold. But the one who endures to the end will be saved." In other words, love for another saves. The Israelites are seeing the contradictions in their lives about the values versus how their rulers are ruling. They become aware of the false prophets that perpetuate these contradictions. In John 10:1, it says, "He who does not enter the sheepfold by the door, but climbs in by another way, that man is a thief and a robber." And in John 10:7, it says, "So again Jesus said to them, Very truly, I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and bandits." In other words, thieves and bandits are those who put wealth before equality, that put oneself before the care of another. One who does not care to be a sheep, but strives to be a wolf, even disguising as a sheep, which is the wolf that Jesus warns about. I don't know of any Christian nationalist who says, "I am humble, I love humanity, I will care for equal justice, even if it means I lose relative power. I use my vote to advocate for love and justice in the world." I don't know of a Christian nationalist who directly uses the gates of Jesus with his love of the poor and marginalized. But as John 10:1 says in the Bible, they climb in by another way. These thieves and bandits steal the right for a woman to choose over her own body. The thieves and bandits choose profit over protecting the earth. The thieves and bandits choose fear over love. What happened with the Israelites is that the Babylonians refused to acknowledge that the Israelites were deserving of something that was beyond servitude and slavery, other than the god King Marduk, and Israelites did not believe Marduk was equal to God. Where idolatry seemed to be a given, they saw a choice. And the turnaround took centuries, but hope was there for the faithful who believed in a better world. The Israelites grew over the centuries to have their own kingdom. Once having their own kingdom established, they began having their own kings. Their own kingdom had corruption after corruption after corruption, and they had to rethink events that led their own kings from working with the Syrians, the Babylonians, and other rulers who had traditionally suppressed the Israelites. They were supporting, in a circuitous route, the oppression of themselves through corrupt rulers. Whether Babylonia, the time of Caesar or Augustus, the Rohingya genocide in Burma, the Nazis burning Jews, the Serbians engaging in ethnic cleansing against Bosnian Muslims, Mao's Great Leap Forward, which resulted in 45 million deaths, the Hutus mass murdering Tutsis, or President Andrew Jackson leading charges to annihilate Native Americans, hate and fear have overtaken more peaceful times. The Bible calls for humanity to care for all of the flock of the virtuous, of the compassionate, of the caretakers of the marginalized. Acts 20 to 28:30, Paul says, "Pay careful attention to yourselves and to all of the flock in which the Holy Spirit has made you overseers, to care for the church of God, which he obtained with his blood. I know that after I leave, savage wolves will come in among you and will not spare the flock. Some, even from your own group, will come distorting the truth in order to entice the disciples to follow them. These wolves aren't to be seen as an outside threat, but they come from within, through disguise as appearing as one of the sheep themselves." And Acts further says in 20:34 to 35, "You yourselves know that these hands of mine have supplied my own needs and the needs of my companions. In everything I did, I showed you that by kind and hard work we must help the weak, remembering the words Jesus said himself, 'It is more blessed to give than to receive.'" Sheep are known to be docile, friendly, and live in community. I was reading up on the behaviors of sheep recently and learned they exhibit stressful emotions if left alone. Sheep's natural instinct is to be in community. Now, a wolf can be a lone wolf, but also travel in packs. It protects its own individual pack over all else and will kill. Jesus didn't use the symbol of sheep and wolf, I think, willy-nilly, in sharing his view of theology with symbols. The canine world, which I love, also has their amazing qualities, but they are not the first animal to think of when thinking about universals, of going beyond individual packs or themselves. If we are truly interconnected, and if we believe a political border, whether a state or nation, doesn't define someone's worth, and if we are privileged to be in a position of help, would we not want to live up to the standard of Jesus' disciples? Our bubbles suggest that we live in more peaceful times than not. We forget that centuries of oppression, famine, and war that consistently are fought in every corner of this world. We forget the sacrifices of those who came before, whether Gandhi, Mandela, Harriet Tubman, or Jesus. It is then when we forget the wolves are right there at the door and have now entered, waiting to take advantage. We then blame the wolf because we neglected to help Jesus keep watch at the open doors. Democracy might not be perfect, but it does allow one vote per person for many adults in this country. Well, not prisoners, not ex-prisoners, and not non-documented community members, but that's a whole other sermon. This upcoming election is our responsibility in doing our part of keeping the wolves at bay and kicking them out of the pen that kill the helpless sheep. The wolves of fear, the wolves of hatred, the wolves of anti-democracy, the wolves of injustice, which are at the door, and they have sunk their teeth into the foundation that upholds that door. Voting itself is an opportunity not granted to everyone in this world. I don't think that voting itself is necessarily a sacred act, but using the method of voting to vote for equality, for justice, and for love is. May we be the watchers to protect peace, to protect justice, to protect love and compassion in our interconnected and sacred world of which we are all a part. These are our Unitarian Universalist values. May it be so, and amen. This is the time where we have our collection plate, and it is an opportunity to offer, if you're not a member, or offer in addition to your pledge. And we give, right now, 50% of our plate to a nonprofit that our social justice ministry chooses. And for this Sunday, the ministry, social justice ministry, has chosen to support the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice. The Deep South Center for Environmental Justice is dedicated to improving the lives of children and families harmed by pollution and vulnerable to climate change in the Gulf Coast region through research, education, community, and student engagement for policy change, as well as health and safety training for environmental careers. The Deep South Center for Environmental Justice was formerly affiliated with Xavier and Dillard University, two historically Black universities in New Orleans. Recently, the center's leadership restructured the organization to be fully independent, a nonprofit entity, in order to rise to the unique challenges of climate change facing communities of color and poor communities in the South. And just thank you so much for the generosity that you've been giving over the last couple months. Through our plate collections, we've collected almost $1,200, which is a wonderful amount, and that is shared outward with these important nonprofits that we try to give generously to. So thank you for always being able to support our church and the ministries that we support.
In 146, 146, 146. We'll start halfway through it.
just about to sing from my gentle, angry people. And those closing words are, we are justice-seeking people, and we are singing for our lives. So please rise and sing as we sing for our lives.